Hello, viewers, hello, listeners, and hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to my channel where we are on a journey to make literature in English easier and simpler than it seems or than people make it appear to be. Today, we are still continuing with the literary devices or the figurative devices. And in today's lesson, we'll be looking at anaphora as a device. We'll also look at allusion, and if time permits us, we'll add another device, which is chiasmus or chiasmus. Now, let's move straight into our lesson. What is anaphora? Anaphora it can be a grammatical term and it can also be a literary term. Now, I'm looking at anaphora as a literary term. So if you look at anaphora in literature as a device, it is the repetition of the same word or a group of words at the beginning of lines in a poem or at the beginning of a piece of writing. So when you read a piece of writing and maybe 3, 4, 5 lines or 2, 3, 4, 5 lines or a couple of lines or a couple of sentences begins with the same word, maybe as simple as in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the Holy Spirit. So in the name, or in, being the same word that is repeated at the beginning of each line or at the beginning of each sentence. Each line in poetry, each sentence in other pieces of creative writings like prose, like drama and the rest, then we call it anaphora. So anaphora is a form of repetition. When we're dealing with sound devices, I mentioned alliteration as a form of repetition. I mentioned assonance as a form of repetition. Anaphora is also another form of repetition. Just that anaphora does not repeat sounds, it repeats words. Now we have some examples on the screen, and one of the most common or popular books by Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities, when you read it, there has been a lot of anaphora. So the ones that have been highlighted in red are the instances of anaphora or the examples of anaphora. Example, it was. That sounds quite funny. So I'll read the whole thing. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of credulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. Now, one key function of repetition in literature is to emphasize or to lay emphasis on something. If a writer wants to draw your attention to what he or she intends to communicate, they do that by using repetition. So repetition primarily emphasizes ideas or helps to lay emphasis on an idea. So when you are reading a book and like The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and you encounter it was, usually when you read the first two, your mind will not come to anything or nothing will be drawn to you. But when you add the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one, then as a critical reader, you tend to question it. There's something we call foregrounding. It foregrounds the idea. It tries to draw your attention. Why this kind of repetition? Why this sort of repetition? And you tend to overanalyze. You tend to concentrate on that section of the piece of writing and analyze it because it gives you an idea that there's something hidden there that you should uncover. And that is one main function of repetition and anaphora in this case. Now, another literary device that I want to draw attention to today is allusion. Allusion practically means making reference to something. Usually, just like metaphor, in explaining points, in explaining ideas, in trying to make your readers, your followers, or your listeners understand you better, it is always ideal to allude to something else. Now, whatever you are alluding to, you have to be very sure that your audience or the people you are addressing, your target readers or your target listeners, have idea about what you are alluding to. So if I'm explaining something that sounds or that seems a bit complex, or I am explaining something that looks or sounds a bit abstract, I'll have to make an allusion, I have to make a reference to something that is simpler or more concrete. And that thing should share similar qualities, similar interpretations, similar meanings with what I'm trying to let you understand. So you use your knowledge of what I have alluded to or what I've made a reference to be able to comprehend or understand the new concept that I am explaining to you. Then we say you have used allusion. Now, we have different types of allusion. Basically, some books will tell you there are two types of allusions. That's the biblical allusion and the historical allusion. Others will also tell you we have three: biblical allusion, historical allusion, and classical allusion. Now, why people believe that there are two types of allusions is that, or allusion is that, the classical allusion is considered by some people to be part of historical allusion. Now, when we talk about biblical allusion, it means that your reference or your point of reference is the Bible. Whatever you are referring to in order to help you explain your new or abstract or complex concept is from the Bible. Then we say you are making a biblical allusion. In other words, you are making a biblical reference. So you want to explain faith, how people hold on to their faith and believe that whatever that happens, they will succeed. You can make a biblical allusion or a biblical reference to Job in the Bible and how he held on to his faith in God and finally became victorious. So whoever that understands and knows the story of Job in the Bible will easily understand your new concept of holding on to your faith. If you want to explain someone who never believes things until he or she sees it practically or physically, you can make a biblical reference to Thomas in the Bible. Thomas was one of the disciples of Jesus Christ, and when Jesus died and rose the third day and they were told, he said he would never believe it until he sees Jesus and, if possible, puts his hands in the scars or the wounds of Jesus before he will believe it. So if somebody doubts to that level or that extent, you can now use Thomas as a point of reference. So if I know how well Thomas doubted, if I believe or if I understand the sort of Thomas very well, then I can understand your explanations or explanation very well. Now, historical allusion here means that your reference or your point of reference is not the Bible in this case, but is to something that happened in the past. It becomes history. Any situation that happened in the past, you draw on that situation to explain a current situation. Then we say that's historical allusion. So you want to talk about resilience, you want to talk about strength, you want to talk about someone who never gives up, someone who is good at his art, someone who is good at his craft, and you don't know how to make people understand what you want to say. You can make a reference to Muhammad Ali, who was one of the best boxers of all time, how resilient he was, how cunning he was, how brave he was. So using Muhammad Ali to explain a current situation is historical allusion. I repeat, make sure that your target audience know the story of your point of reference. Otherwise, you'll try to explain something and use two concepts that are all unfamiliar, and you end up not making your audience understand you very well. Then we have classical allusion. Now, classical allusion is primarily historical in nature, but limited to Greek mythology, the ancient Greek mythology or Greek history. So you talk about the Greek gods of thunder, Zeus and the rest. When you make reference to Achilles and the rest, who are part of the Greek mythology or the Greek history, then you are using classical allusion. Now, there are some examples of allusion on the screen that I want us to look at. One, his smile is like kryptonite to me. Now, kryptonite is the source of weakness of the Superman. Those of you who watch a lot of these adventure movies, you might have watched a movie about Superman, and he's super. He seems to not have any weakness except the kryptonite. So you want somebody to feel how weak you become when the person smiles, or how weak you feel you get when the person smiles. And just saying that get weak when you smile in literature, that sounds ordinary and therefore does not carry any emotions or any intellectual prowess. But when you make reference to kryptonite and your audience who have deep understanding of how kryptonite weakens Superman, then you can imagine how is a Superman seems not to have any weakness and all of a sudden gets weak by a particular element, and you're also comparing it to someone whose smile makes you weak, it becomes better. Like the understanding level becomes better than just saying it in layman's language. Another example is Achilles' heel. So, like I said, Achilles is practically in Greek mythology. So, Achilles, briefly, the story of Achilles is like a guy who was born called Achilles and was deep in the river of the goddess, and wherever the water from the river touched for him became indestructible. But before the mother dipped him in the river, the mother held his heel. So the hands of the mom was around his heels, therefore the water couldn't touch there. So the only point of weakness for Achilles was his heel. So anytime you hear someone saying, "This is my Achilles heel," the person is drawing or making reference to that mythology, that story, to tell you that this is his only weakness. Another example is snake. You are a snake. This is metaphor. You are a snake. But the snake here is also a biblical reference to the sly, the sneaky, the cunning nature of the snake, how the snake managed to deceive Eve. So deception. Then the flood, another biblical allusion to the flood of Noah, or the flood during Noah's days and what Noah had to do, Noah's ark, and the rest. So these are the three types of allusions that we have. And to be able to speak or write in a more intellectual and matured way and still sound a bit simple, you can make proper use of allusions. Now, in today's lesson, like I told you, I don't want the lessons to be too long so that you can follow it, understand it, and ask your questions. So in today's lesson, we looked at two predominant literary devices that you can explore and also try to use them in your writing. We look at anaphora, which is a kind of repetition, usually at the beginning of words, at the beginning of lines, or beginning of sentences. We also look at allusion, and we look at the three types of allusion. Allusion basically means making reference, and the three types: biblical allusion. Here your reference is the Bible. We have classical allusion. Your reference is Greek mythology. Then we also have historical allusion. Your reference is events that happened in the past. Yeah, I know somebody may ask me, what about Islamic allusion? Yeah, if you want to make a reference to the Quran, you can call it Islamic allusion. I don't think you have any issue with that. Or Buddhist allusion. Any point of reference, you can name it. And that's what I told you at the beginning of our lessons, that, or at the beginning of this whole journey, that what we are doing, literature is a subjective subject. So opinions vary. And like they say, opinions are like noses, and everybody has one. Thank you for being part of today's lesson. Drop your comments. Don't forget to subscribe. And let's continue to go on this journey. Bye-bye. See you later. What the? I spoke in vain.